That's just policy, and this is the worst thing you can do. And so I immediately rejected that. And so, in fact, with the Jordan Peterson thing, I'll leave him alone after this, but it's like, you want to talk about psychopaths? Like, sir, you were on record saying, give them hell. That was your response. And for the guy who talks about hell all the time.
Yeah, right.
You don't think hell it really exists? It does. You haven't met enough. Yeah, go to Gaza. Hell does exist. You said give them hell, and that's exactly what they got. Like, so, maybe examine yourself before you're saying, oh, but he said a thing about the Jews, so he's the dark tetrad. But then it just seemed to me on top of that. So that's like my worldview. Like, I don't actually think bigotry is the worst thing. I think it can be bad, but I don't think it's the worst thing. But then even from, like, say, a liberal worldview, like, isn't, like, Daryl Davis, like, the big hero story? And I'm not, like, claiming that that's what I'm doing with you. It's not. Right. But, like, the idea of, like, you're like, even the guy who you say is the famous guy who, like, converted all the Klansmen, well, he did it by talking to him and being decent. Just be cool. That's, like, rule number one. Like, always, and that always seems so obvious to me, particularly as a Jewish person, but I just like, as a Jew, I would say that. But that you're just like, oh, there's these people who hate Jews. I was like, well, I should probably be cool. Because it's kind of hard for people to hate someone who's cool to them. And it's just so weird to me that everybody else's opinion is like, no, this is the one thing that's unacceptable, bigotry. Anything, the government just passed a law that says they can detain you without charges, whatever. But, like, no one's being a bigot about it, right? They're doing it to whites and blacks equally. Like, okay. And then number two, like, what is this thing that we ought to shut people out of the conversation? It just seems so counterproductive and stupid.
Well, and it's not even just bigotry. In particular, it's words. It's not like you even have to do a bigoted thing, like you beat up a black person for being black or you discriminate actively. It's like, if you have said something that sounds racist, is racist, that is worse than murder, war, etc. And that was kind of like a phenomenon this summer, because I was so outspoken against the war in Gaza, and the clips were going around on TikTok and Instagram, and a lot of liberals are saying, wait a second, even he is saying this is evil. This is a guy we're supposed to hate. Maybe the broken clock is right twice a day. And I was on my show reminding people, like, yeah, maybe I'm racist. Maybe we disagree on issues of race, but I'm against murder. I'm against genocide. And like you said, is that not the actual moral paradigm? Is like killing, war, famine? Are these things not the real evils? And maybe bigotry is somewhere further away from that, and saying things that might be bigoted further even still from that. And we live in a society now where it seems like if you have ever uttered anything that's bad, it haunts you.
Yeah.
It's like you look at my Wikipedia page, and it's like, he's a racist, sexist, homophobe, Islamophobe. In 2018, he said this. In 2020, he said that. And I go on shows, and in the news reports, they list, like, things I have said. It's like I do a talk show. Yeah. I talk 3 hours a day for a living for 10 years, and sometimes it sounds controversial or provocative or offensive, but doesn't that kind of go with the territory of freedom of conscience? If we can think, should we not be able to speak? And if we speak, can we not be wrong? Can we not be funny? Can we not be insensitive or bombastic? And I guess this gets to something about, because you think, well, society shouldn't be this way, but why is it this way? People are hanged by their words selectively. This is like, these are tools of reputational destruction. They don't like where you're pointed, so then they look for things that are going to hurt people's feelings and say, oh, well, you shouldn't listen to this guy because he said this, and I bet you don't like how that sounds, huh? Because when you look at, I brought this up on PBD, Ben Shapiro in the year 2000, I think, wrote an article about ethnic cleansing. It said transfer is not a dirty word. And he's arguing for literal ethnic cleansing. Now, I have never argued anything close to that. I've never made the argument that we should ethically cleanse blacks from the United States. But if I did, I'd be hanged by that forever. Yeah. Is Shapiro. Why and why not? He is not reminded of that every time he goes around, not because he apologized for it 20 years later, but because he has all the correct opinions. He's 100%. Not a target. He's got backing. And so that kind of tells us that, and by the way, the same applies to all other kinds of scandals. If we want to have an open society, and that's ironic coming from me, but we do need
libertarian Nick Fuentes.
Yeah, sort of. It's like you do need some level of tolerance, actually,
Yeah.
to inoculate yourself from using reputational destruction for political control. Because that's what I've come to realize about it.
Dude,
All right, so you know what's ironic about this whole thing? And in the background, I was looking up the 10 Commandments because you do see this a lot. This is a point that is definitely well received when it comes to the racism and how we look at bigotry and racism as the worst thing in the world, where we'll look at somebody who's racist worse than a murderer. And in some ways. Now, I'm not saying that, hey, when you can get arrested for being racist and you're going to get the same type of charge legally. But think about justified murder. Maybe look at that. And then when we factor into justified justice, right? Justified murder, we'll excuse that behavior. We'll excuse that behavior, perhaps even more so. I don't even know if there would be a comparable term, justified racism. But we will excuse the murder of Bibi Netanyahu, the genocide that's going on right in front of our face. We'll deprioritize that and prioritize the things that may come across as racist, or even if they are racist. I'm looking at the 10 Commandments. I don't see anything that directly addresses being racist. That doesn't mean it's not bad. I want to be very clear. That's not something that I align myself with. However, looking from the outside in, it has been something that I've been caught up in. Why? Because it attaches to people's emotions, right? Where somebody getting murdered, there may not be a connection to you and your feelings. But if somebody's being murdered or somebody's not getting certain opportunities or having certain opportunities taken away from them or certain resources, whatever it may be, freedoms, just because of race, then people can put themselves in their shoes if they are a part of the group that is the distinguishing quality that people are being oppressive against. Like if I'm Black and they're doing something to Black people based on your Black skin, obviously I'm going to have some type of feelings about that. Now, where I take it, that's a different question. But when we look at a lot of these situations, it does seem to be used in a way where murder is not used. And is that because in our minds that we just have come to see so much murder and we just think of it as a necessary evil? But I guess we don't see racism as a necessary evil. I'm just kind of going through these thoughts in my mind as I'm talking with y'all. Like once you do something racist or deem racist, you know, Nick Fuentes can be canceled for the comments that he made in a private conversation. Meanwhile, Netanyahu won't get canceled. Barack Obama won't get canceled, him dropping all these drones. Bill Clinton, Iraq war, you know, that, I mean, everybody was involved in that for so long. Why do we not hold these people accountable for violating God's commandments? Why is it not, or let me ask this question. If it was regarded in a way where we look at racism and we're quick to call out racism about any and everything, to shine that racism light, to uncover some type of racist scenario, whether it's legit or not legit. Obviously, there are some situations where it is legit. I think that Israel-Palestine is 100% racist. I think it's prioritizing a race, ethnicity, whatever you want to call it, religious group. It's prioritizing the lives and looking at this group of lives as superior to somebody else's. That's what I look at with the situation. Like it's just, oh, the only way to justify this is to say that, oh, these people are better, are more valuable than that other group of people. They're more humane than that other group of people. And that's why we're okay with them dying. Perhaps if we directed a lot of the energy that we direct towards racism, just asking a question, perhaps if we did do that, maybe the outcome would be more accountable. We wouldn't just be okay with wars. Y'all know me, I'm against wars, I'm against violence. I just don't think it's realistic to think that you killing somebody is going to resolve a conflict. You killing a group of people is going to resolve a conflict. That just It's never, when I look at street gangs, it doesn't work. When I look at any other scenario, it doesn't work. Whether it's the mob or the mafia, it only raises the temperature for violence, in my opinion. It only raises the temperature. In a lot of ways, this has been illustrated when it comes to racism. When we stoke that fire, what ends up happening? We get a George Floyd situation. We get a Trayvon Martin situation. And not to say that those weren't or were racist situations. I'm not here to argue that. But what I'm saying is that when we shine that racism light on everything, then clearly certain situations, when they come about, they're going to be escalated. They're going to be highlighted. People are going to have a boiling point. It's the same thing, or I would think the same thing would happen if we looked at murder the way that this is. And maybe I'm trying to think if that analogy just made sense. Let me work my way through that. When people, the racist aspect, I think that's clear. But I think what I'm maybe needing to process a little bit more is the connection. And if we looked at murder just as a bad thing, how we would hold people accountable. Because the riots and stuff like that, how we riot against, I don't think we should have the type of riots that we had going against George Floyd's. I'm trying to think. I'm really trying to be honest with y'all. Because this is what happens, right? The liberals, the left, and I hate to just make it all about that, but the politicians, let me say that, they pick and choose what group of victims they want to emotionally appeal to. So if they keep telling you that this is what happens to you because you're black or you're this, the world is racist, the people running things are racist, the cops are racist, we need to defund the police, they're just killing people. Clearly, there's going to be a boiling point. So I guess my conclusion as I process it in my mind is not that, like, I'm not saying to use that same energy and address it towards murder, because I think that would only, if we use the same energy, then it's only going to lead to more murder. I think that's actually what we've been doing. But perhaps to just look at it as, hey, this is a terrible thing. This is a negative thing that we can't accept in our society. I guess that's how I would look at it. Like racism, we need to prioritize racism. We don't need to prioritize that, but we do need to prioritize the murder and all these other things, because racism, I'll be totally honest, I think Dave said it, Nick may have said it as well. We tend to favor our group of people and the people that look like us. We tend to, if we have the power to do so, to give those people advantages, just naturally. Some people don't do it to the same lengths that others do, but we tend to do that if we're being totally honest. And that may just be one of those issues that we'll have to kind of address or back into in a different way, because when you look at it now, it doesn't seem like it's getting any better. But Nick brought up the point as far as like, yeah, well, I may be racist, but I'm not okay with murder. And that's something that has always stood out, where it's like, you're calling this guy racist, and you'll have Josh Hammers of the world, Bibi Netanyahu, whoever, calling Nick Fuentes racist, even Charlie Kirk to a certain degree. But then you're cheerleading for a genocide to happen against a very particular group of people. Ben Shapiro doesn't get canceled for pushing for an ethnic cleansing, all these different things. So it really just depends on, I guess, who's in power, what's beneficial for that particular group, and they will pick and choose how to create narratives that align with that to get people to be complicit in the evil and destruction that they're causing. That would be my takeaway. But it's just something interesting to me. Maybe it's interesting to y'all too, or maybe you see it a little bit differently. Maybe I may be drawing a blank. It happens. But I'm just not truly understanding why so many of these religious people prioritize the issue of racism or bigotry above murder. Now, maybe that's because they think the racism and bigotry is leading to more murders. That's a legit, I think that's a legit thought process, but it still doesn't excuse the actual murders. Because you can have, and this may sound crazy, I'm being totally honest, you can have a society that looks out for their own but still conducts themselves in a way where they're not committing murders and genocides, right? But once you accept murder, then really nothing's off the table. If we're not looking down on murder, if we're not looking down on violence, if we're not calling it out and acting as if it is one of God's 10 commandments, then we're always going to see it as a justifiable option. So hopefully I'm touching on the right things. I don't want to ramble for too long, but this is just the thought process that I have. Sometimes I don't think these things out and take a day to respond. I want to get them out to y'all, but I think it's important for us to be vulnerable enough to just see, hey, this is what I'm initially thinking right after I hear that. And then you'll see my mind going a little bit. Maybe I'll pause and you'll see the actual process going through. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but maybe that's just me. But as always, like, subscribe, and most importantly, well, turn your notifications on. But most importantly, leave a message. Let me know exactly how we're doing, and let me know where I can be corrected, what blind spots I may have, what I'm missing, because ultimately the goal is to have humanity living in harmony, right? To achieve that greater peace, to strive for it with the intentions of achieving it. So on that note, I'll see y'all soon.